If you take a look at the Lokpal and the Lokayat Act 2013, this was an act which came into force after the whole thing of India against, what you can call corruption movement. जो इंडिया अगेंस्ट करप्शन का जो पूरा मूवमेंट था, उस मूवमेंट के माध्यम से we are sitting at a point where the Lokpal Act was created. The demand of that movement was to create a Lokpal, right? Now, what is basically the concept of a Lokpal? Lokpal का मतलब होता है, if you take a look at, for example, the Scandinavian term which is used for Lokpal and from which this kind of a body has originated, it is called an ombudsman. Lokpal is a kind of a ombudsman. Now, what is an ombudsman? Lokpal का मतलब होता है, लोक का मतलब होता है people, पाल का मतलब होता है, लेट्स से फॉर एग्जांपल अ प्रोटेक्टर. प्रोटेक्टर आप समझते हैं, मतलब जो कि किसी चीज का ध्यान रखता है, किसी चीज का मतलब किसी और व्यक्ति के लिए उस चीज का ध्यान रखता है. तो अ पर्सन हु इज कॉल्ड अ पाल in Sanskrit is a person who is protecting a particular area. So for example, you have, let's say, a name like Dharmpal. Dharmpal is basically the protector of religious ideas, right? तो जो किसी चीज की रक्षा करता है उसे कहते हैं लोकपाल, पाल. और जो लोगों के धन की रक्षा करता है, लोगों के विश्वास की रक्षा करता है, सरकार के विरोध में कभी कभी काम करता है, उसे कहते हैं लोकपाल. सो द आइडिया इज वेरी सिंपल. बॉडी ऑफ लोकपाल created under the Lokpal and the Lokayat Act is a kind of a body which, let's say for example, is known as an ombudsman, and the task of the ombudsman, the Lokpal, is to create, let's say for example, inquiry into complaints against the Prime Minister and cabinet ministers, right? To create inquiry into complaints against the Prime Minister and cabinet ministers on allegations of करप्शन. ठीक है. लोकपाल का मतलब होता है कि जो प्रधानमंत्री और केंद्रीय मंत्रियों के अगेंस्ट अगर किसी प्रकार की करप्शन की या किसी प्रकार की ग्राफ्ट की एलिगेशन लगाई जाती है, तो उसमें जो बॉडी बनेगी स्पेसिफिकली, जो कि इन ऑफिशियल फंक्शनरीज को इन्वेस्टिगेट और इंक्वायर कर सकती है, उसको हम लोकपाल कहेंगे. तो ये लोकपाल तो होता है आपका सेंटर के लेवल पे, और जो स्टेट के लेवल पे जो बॉडी होती है इसी चीज को करने के लिए, उसको लोकायत कहते हैं. लोकायत एक तरह से स्टेट ऑम्बड्समैन होता है. Lokayat is a kind of a state ombudsman, and what Lokayat is basically interested in doing is the fact that it is looking at what you can call complaints against the chief ministers and cabinet ministers in the state. ठीक है. तो भारत के पार्लियामेंट ने 2013 में लोकपाल और लोकायत एक्ट 2013 पास किया था, जिसके माध्यम से लोकपाल की संस्था को स्थापित किया गया था सेंट्रल लेवल पे, और लोकायत की संस्था को स्थापित करने की प्रावधान क्रिएट किए गए थे स्टेट लेवल पे. ठीक. क्योंकि यूपीएससी का एग्जाम है तो लोकपाल पर ज्यादा विशेष ध्यान देंगे, और विशेष ध्यान देने का उत्सव यह है कि 2024 में ही भारत के लोकपाल को एक नया चेयरमैन मिला है. ठीक है. तो आप इस तरह से देख सकते हैं कि एक बेसिक आइडिया क्या है लोकपाल का. अगर आप फॉर एग्जांपल सिंपल तरीके से लोकपाल एक्ट पढ़ें तो इसमें कुछ कुछ आपको समझ में आ जाएगा. ठीक है. अब थोड़ा ध्यान दीजिएगा इस चीज पे. हम डायरेक्टली लोकपाल एक्ट से कुछ कुछ इन्फॉर्मेशन निकालने की कोशिश करेंगे, तो थोड़ा सा इस चीज पे आप फोकस करिएगा समझने के लिए. मैं फिर से आपको बता दूं, Why are we creating a kind of this? This is 2024 March. A new Lokpal has been appointed. Former Supreme Court Judge A.M. Khanwilkar has administered the oath as a chairperson of the Lokpal. ठीक है, ये वाला जो एक पॉइंट है पूरा, दैट इज व्हाट बेसिकली वी आर गोइंग टू टेक अ लुक एट. और इसमें ये वाली देखने वाली बात भी है कि जो लोकपाल का जो ऑफिस है वो 2 साल से खाली पड़ा था जब जस्टिस पिनाकी चंद्र घोष हैड रिटायर्ड इन 2022. तो बहुत समय के बाद एक लोकपाल के चेयरमैन के ऑफिस को भरा जा रहा है, जिससे कि न्यूज बन के आ रही है. तो इसीलिए थोड़ा सा हम इस पर ध्यान देंगे. पहली चीज ये है, व्हाट इज द कॉम्पोजिशन ऑफ द लोकपाल. तो लोकपाल में होते कौन कौन है. ठीक है, अब देखिए, लोकपाल शैल कंपोज ऑफ द फॉलोइंग ऑब्जेक्ट्स. Just take a look at this. Lokpal shall consist of A and B. Please take a look at this. The Lokpal shall consist of a chairperson who is or has been the Chief Justice of India, or is or has been a judge of the Supreme Court, or an eminent person who fulfills the eligibility specified in clause B of section 3. ठीक है, तो अब जो chairperson है लोकपाल का, he has to be either a retired Chief Justice of India or a retired judge of the Supreme Court or an eminent person. ठीक है, तो ये थोड़ा सा ध्यान दीजिएगा इस चीज पे. With regard to asking the question, what is the qualification to become a member, the chairman of the Lokpal, right? Number 1 qualification is a retired Chief Justice. Number 2, a retired judge of the Supreme Court. So Justice A.M. Khanwilkar is a retired judge of the Supreme Court. Okay, and therefore he has been appointed as a Lokpal. So the condition for appointing the chairperson of Lokpal is that you have either the retired Chief Justice of India, retired judge of the Supreme Court, or an eminent person as defined by the Lokpal and Lokayat Act. तो थोड़ा सा ध्यान दीजिएगा इस चीज पे. Qualifications to become a chairperson of the Lokpal is a retired judge of the Supreme Court, retired Chief Justice of India, or an eminent person. Currently, what we have seen is that a retired judge of the Supreme Court has been appointed as a Lokpal. It has happened very recently in the current updates, and that's why I'm asking you to focus upon it specifically. A multiple choice question can come with regard to asking the questions which are the following are eligible criteria for becoming a chairperson of the Lokpal. 3 eligibility criteria. Okay, and then after that, such number of members not exceeding 8 out of whom 50% shall be जुडिशियल मेंबर्स. ठीक है, तो एक तो आपके पास चेयरपर्सन होना चाहिए, उसके अलावा आपके पास 8 अधिक से अधिक मेंबर्स 8 हो सकते हैं. तो आपका जो मैक्सिमम स्ट्रेंथ है लोकपाल की, दैट कैन बी चेयरपर्सन प्लस 8 मेंबर्स. ठीक, ये मैक्सिमम स्ट्रेंथ है. चेयरपर्सन की आपको क्वालिफिकेशंस पता है, और जो 8 मेंबर हैं उनमें से कम 50% जुडिशियल मेंबर्स होने चाहिए. ठीक है, सो दिस इज बेसिकली the point about the point. अब अगर देखा जाए कि क्वेश्चन ये आता है कि जुडिशियल मेंबर का मतलब क्या होता है, तो जुडिशियल मेंबर का मतलब होता है जुडिशियल मेंबर is a judge of the Supreme Court or has been a Chief Justice of a High Court. ठीक है, जुडिशियल मेंबर का अगर आप एक तरह से डेफिनेशन लें लोकपाल के लेवल पे, तो व्हाट इज द डेफिनेशन ऑफ अ जुडिशियल मेंबर? The definition of a judicial member is that that person must be either a retired judge of the Supreme Court or a retired Chief Justice of a High Court. ठीक, that's basically what we want to, in a way, take a look at in summary. So, अगर for example, very simply, if I take a little bit of an understanding about the composition of Lokpal, दो ही चीज करनी है हमको, एक composition करना है, एक powers and functions करना है. अगर आप कॉम्पोजिशन देखेंगे लोकपाल का और आप समझ पा रहे हैं कि मैं इस पे इतना फोकस क्यों कर रहा हूँ, क्योंकि करंट अपडेट्स में इसके ऊपर न्यूज है. इफ यू टेक अ लुक एट द कॉम्पोजिशन ऑफ द लोकपाल, व्हाट वी बेसिकली अंडरस्टैंड विद रिगार्ड टू द कॉम्पोजिशन ऑफ लोकपाल इज 2 points. Number 1, the chairperson is the leader of the Lokpal, and he can be either a retired judge of the Supreme Court, retired Chief Justice of India, or any eminent member. This is what is known as the qualification criteria. Currently, you have a retired judge of the Supreme Court appointed as the chairperson of Lokpal, Justice Khanwilkar, and that is why we're discussing this in the section of current updates class. Are we clear about it? Okay. Second, if you take a look at the members of Lokpal, then Lokpal can go up to 8 members in addition to the chairperson. And out of these 8 members, for example, let's say there are 6 members and there is a chairman. Then out of 6, 3 members have to be what are called judicial members. ठीक है, 6 में से 3, अगर आपने 6 डिसाइड किया है कि 6 मेंबर होंगे लोकपाल के चेयरपर्सन के अतिरिक्त, तो आपके पास उसमें से 50% जुडिशियल मेंबर्स होने चाहिए। जुडिशियल मेंबर होने की क्या क्वालिफिकेशन है कि या तो यू आर अ रिटायर्ड जज ऑफ द सुप्रीम कोर्ट, और यू आर अ रिटायर्ड जज, retired chief justice of a high court. This is basically how you can take a look at the composition of the Lokpal. Class, please focus. 2024, you have an appointment of a new Lokpal. I am going in the background of this and trying to understand why the appointment of the new Lokpal can become a relevant feature for the coverage of current updates on the subject of governance. ठीक है, ट्रांसपेरेंसी, अकाउंटेबिलिटी इत्यादि में अच्छा खासा कवरेज लोकपाल का दिया जाता है जीएस पेपर नंबर 2 में, तो उसी के बेसिस पे हम थोड़ा सा ध्यान दे रहे हैं इस चीज के ऊपर। ठीक है, अब इसके बाद आप ये देखिए कि सिलेक्शन प्रोसीजर क्या है लोकपाल का। मतलब क्वेश्चन इज हाउ आर द चेयरपर्सन and members of Lokpal selected? That is the question we are trying to ask, कि लोकपाल के चेयरपर्सन और मेंबर को सेलेक्ट किस तरह से किया जा सकता है। ठीक है, अब आप देखिए फॉर एग्जांपल सेक्शन 4, द चेयरपर्सन एंड मेंबर्स शैल बी अपॉइंटेड बाय द प्रेसिडेंट आफ्टर द obtaining the recommendations of the selection committee. तो इसको आप मान सकते हैं कि एक तरह से सिलेक्शन कमिटी है फॉर लोकपाल। ठीक है, तो अब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल अगर प्रश्न पूछा जाए कि सिलेक्शन कमिटी में कौन कौन लोग हैं लोकपाल को चयनित करने के लिए, प्रधानमंत्री जो कि चेयरपर्सन है, स्पीकर ऑफ द लोकसभा जो कि मेंबर है, एंड द लीडर ऑफ द ऑपोजिशन इन द लोकसभा जो कि मेंबर है। यू सी, सो यू हैव अ काइंड ऑफ अ ABC, and you have after that D, the Chief Justice of India or a judge of the Supreme Court nominated by him, and one eminent jurist as recommended by the chairperson and members, right? That's basically what is the selection committee for the Lokpal. So to get a very clear sense of this, if you take a look at this, composition of the Lokpal is that there shall be a chairperson who is supposed to be under these qualifications, and there are going to be members which are going to be up to 8 members, out of which 3 must be judicial members. ठीक है, if you take a look at the selection procedure or a selection criteria, then the idea is that there is a what you can call selection body or selection committee for the Lokpal. Selection committee is a 5-membered body. अब ध्यान से सुनिएगा इसके मेंबर्स कौन कौन है। ठीक है, इट्स अ 5-membered बॉडी। पहले जो इसके मेंबर होते हैं वो होते हैं प्रधानमंत्री। The first member of this body is the Prime Minister. Okay. Second member of the body is Speaker of Lok Sabha. क्लास हो मुझे आशा है कि आप इसको नोट कर रहे होंगे। प्लीज ये सारे आपके प्रीलिम्स के क्वेश्चन बन के आ सकते हैं डायरेक्टली। तीसरे इसके मेंबर होते हैं लीडर ऑफ ऑपोजिशन और लीडर ऑफ द लार्जेस्ट पार्टी इन लोकसभा. Leader of the opposition and leader of the largest party in Lok Sabha. Okay, and the fourth is the Chief Justice of India or a judge of the Supreme Court nominated by the Chief Justice of India. ठीक है, और जो पांचवी चीज होती है वो होता है एक eminent jurist. This is a 5-membered body which is known as a selection committee, which is responsible for the selection of the chairperson and members of the Lokpal. ठीक है, तो इसका अर्थ ये है that when we take a look at, for example, a news article like this, अगर आप इसको देखेंगे, the former Supreme Court Judge A.M. Khanwilkar was appointed as the chairperson of the Anti-Corruption Ombudsman Lokpal nearly 2 years after the post fell vacant. The Lokpal has been working without its regular chiefs since the retirement. And then you have Justice Pradeep Kumar Mohanty, a judicial member of Lokpal, is currently the acting chairperson. A communique issued by the Rashtrapati Bhavan said that the retired Justices Lingappa Narayan Swamy, Sanjay Yadav and Ritu Raj Avasthi have been appointed as judicial members of the Anti-Corruption Ombudsman. Ritu Raj Avasthi also happens to be, by the way, the head of the, what you can say, 22nd Law Commission. तो ये थोड़ा सा आप देख सकते हैं, भारत सरकार ने जो 22nd लॉ कमीशन का गठन किया है, उस लॉ कमीशन को हेड करने के लिए जस्टिस ऋतुराज अवस्थी को नियुक्त किया गया है, और यही लॉ कमीशन यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड के मैटर्स में अपना recommendations तैयार कर रहा है. Currently this, the most important, what you can say, task given to this law commission is to create recommendations for the uniform civil code. ठीक है, तो अब अगर प्रश्न ये पूछा जाता है कि इनका अपॉइंटमेंट कैसे किया गया इन सब लोगों का, तो उसका उत्तर आपको पता है. द क्वेश्चन इज how are these people appointment how are the appointment of these people made? You know the answer to that question. The answer is this paragraph. The chairperson and members of the Lokpal are appointed by the president after obtaining the recommendations of a selection committee having the prime minister as its chairperson. So that's the question that we are answering. What are the components or the members of the selection committee which appoints the chairperson and members of the Lokpal? तो पहला प्रश्न है कि व्हाट इज द कॉम्पोजिशन ऑफ लोकपाल, और उससे लगा हुआ प्रश्न ये है कि जो कॉम्पोजिशन है उसका चयन कैसे किया जाता है. हाउ इज अ सिलेक्शन मेड? सिलेक्शन इज मेड बाय अ बॉडी व्हिच इज known as Selection Committee for the Lokpal under the Lokpal Act 2013. Class, I hope that you are taking a note of this. Are we clear? ठीक है, अब अगला प्रश्न यह आता है कि what are the powers and functions of लोकपाल. बिल्कुल संक्षेप में इसको पढ़ना है प्रीलिम्स के लेवल पे कि लोकपाल की पावर्स और फंक्शन क्या होती है. ये देखिए सेक्शन 12. सेक्शन 12 में वी कॉल व्हाट इज नोन एज अ प्रोसिक्यूशन विंग. प्रोसिक्यूशन का मतलब आप समझते हैं, किसी भी व्यक्ति को किसी क्रिमिनल एक्टिविटीज के अगेंस्ट चार्ज करना, राइट. इसमें जो क्रिमिनल एक्टिविटी होगी वो ज्यादातर होती है प्रिवेंशन ऑफ करप्शन एक्ट. The Lokpal by notification constitute a prosecution will headed by the Director of Prosecution for the purposes of prosecution of public servants in relation to any of the complaint made by the Lokpal under this Act. Provided that till such time the prosecution wing is constituted by the Lokpal, the central government shall make available such number of officers and other staff from its ministries or departments as may be required by the Lokpal for conducting prosecution under this Act. तो prosecution wing एक प्रकार की, एक आप मान के चल सकते हैं, एक इन्वेस्टिगेटिव और एक इन्फोर्समेंट एजेंसी होती है जो कि लोकपाल के साथ अटैच्ड होती है. जो लोकपाल के पास अगर किसी व्यक्ति के अगेंस्ट करप्शन की कंप्लेन आती है जो कि पब्लिक सर्वेंट होता है, तो उस कंप्लेन का मुआयना करके लोकपाल इन्वेस्टिगेशन करने का काम एक प्रोसिक्यूशन विंग को दे सकती है. राइट, दैट्स बेसिकली द एनफोर्समेंट एजेंसी व्हिच इज गिवन टू द लोकपाल विद रिगार्ड टू क्रिएटिंग अ प्रोसिक्यूशन. ठीक है, तो ये सबसे पहली चीज है विच रिगार्ड टू द मूवमेंट ऑफ प्रोसिक्यूशन. अब देखिए, The director of prosecution shall, after having been so directed by the Lokpal, file a case in accordance with the findings of investigation report before the special court, which is the CBI court generally, and take all necessary steps in respect of the prosecution of public servants in relation to any offence punishable under the Prevention of Corruption Act. Okay? So if you just want to, in a way, put a little bit of a summary to this, the principal activity of the Lokpal is, let's say for example, if this is a Lokpal along with the chairman, etc., etc., and let's say for example a complaint is filed by a person. Let's say if a person files a complaint to the Lokpal with regard to saying that a public servant has been found to have committed certain acts of corruption. If a complaint is found that a public servant has been found to do some kind of acts of corruption, and if it is made to the Lokpal, then based upon this complaint, the Lokpal can create a kind of a understanding and the nature of the complaint, etc., etc., and if it is convinced that this complaint has merit, it can forward that complaint to the what is known as prosecution wing, which is a wing attached with the Lokpal, and the Lokpal will take this, the prosecution wing of the Lokpal will take this complaint and convert it into a legal proceeding against the person who is involved in corruption, right? And then the prosecution wing will go to the special court and file whatever technical arguments are to be made under what is known as the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. So that is what we have to understand with regard to the power of the Lokpal to start prosecution of what you can call public servants against whom allegations of corruptions have been made. That kind of a decision has to be taken by the Lokpal. Do you understand the point over here, class? That's what we basically take a look at with regard to Lokpal. Another thing that you can take a look at this is basically that we know charged expenditures of the Consolidated Fund of India. So just a very simple kind of a reference point. Charged expenditures on the Consolidated Fund of India, they are given under Article under Article 1113, the charge expenditures. Article 112 clause 3. A list of charge expenditures are given under the Constitution of India, and it is to be noted that expenses of Lokpal are also known as charged expenditures on the Consolidated Fund of India. Just in case you have a prelims kind of a question on the nature of the charge or the nature of money which is given to the members of Lokpal is withdrawn from the Consolidated Fund of India as charged expenditures on the Consolidated Fund of India. Clear? Okay. Take a look at section 14. What is the jurisdiction in respect of inquiry? Subject to the other provisions of this act, the Lokpal shall inquire or cause an inquiry to be conducted into any matter involved in or arising out of or connected with any allegation of corruption made in a complaint in respect of the following: the Prime Minister of India, who is a Prime Minister of India or who has been a Prime Minister of India, provided that the Lokpal shall not inquire into any matter involved in or arising from or connected with any such allegation of corruption against the Prime Minister, insofar as it relates to international relations, external and internal security, public order, atomic energy, and space. Okay, class, just take a look at this. The most important function of the what you can call Lokpal is to start investigation of corruption against prime ministers, council of ministers, members of parliament, group A, B, C, D officers, and officials of the central government. This is basically what comes under the jurisdiction of the Lokpal. So the target of the Lokpal is the high class officers of the government of India, which goes up to the Prime Minister of India. So if the Prime Minister of India is suspected of any kind of a graft or corruption, or the cabinet ministers or member of parliament or group A, B, C, D officers and other officials of central government, all of these people come under the target range of the Lokpal. But specifically, Lokpal is very, very importantly placed to create a kind of accountability to the highest functionaries within the government of India, including the Prime Minister of India, the cabinet ministers, and the members of parliament. As much as these high functionaries are going to be there, this is going to be a very clear understanding of the functions of the Lokpal. And of course, there are certain exceptions, etc., but we don't need to go into that. But this is basically the jurisdiction of the Lokpal, right? So, in that sense, you get a sense of another thing. First of all, how the prosecution wing with attached with the Lokpal works, and then Lokpal with regard to its jurisdiction, Lokpal with regard to its jurisdiction can create proceedings against the prime ministers, cabinet ministers. With this is all with regard to corruption, right? Then you have members of parliament, and then you have class A, B, C, D officers, and also you have central government officers, right? And you see, in this particular aspect, the idea is to create what you can call a kind of a Prevention of Corruption Act proceedings, 1988, right? So if you take a look at this page very simply crystallizes for you the entire activity with regard to the power, functions, and the jurisdiction of the Lokpal. I hope that you're able to take a note of this. This amount of information should be sufficient for you to be able to deal with the question of the general nature in the prelims examination. इससे बाहर या इससे ज़्यादा टेक्निकली कॉम्प्लिकेटेड क्वेश्चन नहीं आएगा लोकपाल पे, लेकिन क्वेश्चन लोकपाल से आ जाता है. The present CGI cannot be a Lokpal. It is only a retired Chief Justice of India who can be a Lokpal. The present CGI can be is possibly a member of the committee which appoints a Lokpal, right? So you can, the selection committee which appoints a Lokpal can compose of the Chief Justice of India, but a current Chief Justice cannot be a Lokpal. A current judge of the Supreme Court cannot be a Lokpal, and a current MP or something like cannot be a Lokpal. And therefore the retired only can be Lokpal. Justice Khanvilkar is a retired judge of the Supreme Court. So class, are we getting this point? We are trying to cover as much and as exhaustively the areas which I feel are important from the subject of governance for the UPSC prelims examination this time.